Okay, well, thank you very much, and I'm indeed pleased to be here. I think that this is indeed a time of transition for IRIS, with David Simpson stepping down and my former boss, Bob Dietrich, taking his place. It's going to be an interesting experience working with Bob in this way. It's a transition also in that we are looking forward to how we're going to follow the first 10 years of what I think is a stunning success of EarthScope. Success due in large part to the efforts of you all, the IRIS community. Bob Dietrich asked me to do some looking forward from an NSF perspective to the follow-on to this current 5-year SAGE Award that we just began. That supports both the IRIS contribution to EarthScope and the IRIS core operations. I'm only one of the NSF representatives at this meeting, and much of the future is still uncertain because we at NSF are still working out what is possible and desirable with the community help. I know Greg Anderson is here, the program officer for both the SAGE Award and EarthScope, and Maggie Benoit is here, program officer for the EarthScope Science Program, and I believe Leonard Johnson is Leonard here? He's signed up. He is the program officer for the Integrated Earth Systems, a new program that is the next stage beyond the Continental Dynamics program that Leonard was a program officer for many years. And they have valuable viewpoints, and hopefully what I say will not be in a disagreement with what they think, but as I say, we're still trying to come to grips with how we're going to go forward also. And part of the reason for that is that we have a vacancy in our management structure. The division director for Earth Sciences is, there's a search underway right now, and there's an acting division director, Sonia Esperanza. We also had a vacancy at the head of NSF for probably a year. Now that's been filled with France Cordova. And there's actually 2 other divisions in the Geo Directorate that are also searching for division directors. So it's kind of a leadership crisis, I think, at NSF that hopefully will resolve fairly soon. I think it's useful in this context to review some of the events that started these facility efforts. The facility, when I say that, I mean IRIS and EarthScope. Now, the beginnings of IRIS go back to 1985, and I'm not going to review that. That's been done many times and is well known. EarthScope history is a little more recent, and it illustrates one path towards starting up a new effort at NSF, albeit it's a special kind of path, the path of MREFC, which stands for Major Research Equipment and Facilities Construction. That's very important. It was back then called just the MRE account. Back in 1998, the MRE account was really dominated by the Mathematics and Physical Sciences Directorate for building big physics and astronomy things. And there was a change at NSF that because of this domination, they wanted to broaden the application of MRE, and so they invited the other directorates to basically propose to the account. And the way we responded to that in Earth Sciences is that we had our Instrumentation and Facilities program, which is the natural program for facilities, of course, to put out to the community a word that, what big facilities projects can we do that would be a major step forward in the sciences. And 2 one-pagers, 1 or 2 pagers came out of that, Plate Boundary Observatory and US Array. there, basically, for a number of reasons, that nothing much happened until that was in 1998. In February of 1999, there was a push by, actually, Southern California Earthquake Center, SCEC, to come and meet with NSF management, and because they were concerned about the future of SCEC and how that would work. And Tom Henye was then the head of SCEC. And so he wanted to come, so we set up a briefing. It was a good time because we had the current AD for GEO, Bob Carell, but we also had a new division director named Herman Zimmerman. And so we set up a briefing for those two. When the SCEC group kind of got together with Robin Reichland and I, who were the geophysics people at the time, it was decided that why not take advantage of this time with the upper management to organize a broader briefing on more broad geophysical topics. And so it was decided that, well, we'd not only brief on SCEC, but we'd drag out these MRE one-pagers, which was PBO and US Array, plus a proposal that had been kicking around in EAR for more than 10 years, the San Andreas Fault Drilling Project, and brief all of those to the new management. Interestingly, and it was a large group of community leaders that came, and in that briefing, once we came out, I mean, Zimmerman and Carell were literally excited about this. And I remember, I can quote Zimmy, I actually wrote it down. He said in his way, this is Zimmy, he says, let's do it all. And so then we started thinking, well, how do we do this? We coined the term EarthScope. We had the problem with the drilling project because it was really an activity, and this was a facility construction account. But when you really think about it, drilling a hole is really building something in the reverse of building a skyscraper. You're constructing this facility with a hole in the ground, and then you can instrument it. So we changed the name to San Andreas Fault Observatory at Depth. So that's how SAFOD got coined. And then there was a very short fuse at that point because that meeting was in February. There was a retreat the next month, a GEO retreat, and at the same time of the retreat, that year's MRE panel was meeting. So we quickly put together some slides. Bob Carell had to leave the retreat and go make presentations to the MRE panel, and they were excited about it, and we got the go-ahead to start. But that was the beginning of a very long process. We had to write. It's a strange NSF funding process. It's a proposal basically done internally at NSF. So we wrote a proposal to the MRE panel, made presentations. The panel approved taking it to the National Science Board in their fall meeting of that year of 1999 for incorporation in the fiscal year 2000 budget. We took it to the National Science Board, and it was approved for FY 2000. And then we thought we were in, but then something that is big as MRE or MREFC accounts, that's a little bit more visible in Congress, and as it turns out, other parts of NSF who want to get theirs in, this is really lobbying bait. And partly because of that and because of the size of the MREFC account was bigger than what Congress wanted, they removed, quote, without prejudice, the EarthScope proposal from 2000 and encouraged us to put it in future years' budgets. So we did that. We did it the next year, 2001. We did it again the next year in 2002. Both times got kicked out for reasons that are not quite understood by me and probably had some politics involved in it. But finally, because NSF still had us on their list, it was approved for 2003 start, and that happened. And by the time we finally got funding, and only by the time we got funding, we were able to hire a new person for Earthscope. Kay Shedlock was the first Earthscope program officer, and now the follow-on to that is Greg Anderson, and we were able to get a second person for the science program, Maggie Benoit. So that's how all that happened. So how does this sort of shed light on where we are now? That was a major, a large facility account, and we are basically at the 10-year anniversary of Earthscope and trying to figure out where we go from here. I think we have to ask a number of questions to do this. For example, have we followed the vision of Earthscope to its conclusions, and we can now shut it down? We've done basically everything we wanted to do with the facility. We have built a major facility, just like the other MRESC projects like LIGO and telescopes and things like that. Does Earthscope still have value as a facility? These are questions I'm just sort of proposing. I mean, I think I know the answers, but these are questions I think the community needs to propose and answer and give and help NSF with those answers. I think it's useful to think of the future of the NSF seismological structure or facilities into three categories. The first category, of course, is a facility. IRIS deals with both what it calls its core facilities, which is the historical IRIS activities, plus it took over the US array part of Earthscope. So that's the facility. Another category that's been talked about is you can put your own term on it, what's some people call the next big thing or the follow-on to Earthscope, sort of implying that that's sort of an MRESC scale type of project. And then a third category is the Earthscope science program. We started up a whole new program to support Earthscope science that people write proposals to. And so those are, I think, the three categories that we at NSF will be dealing with in the next couple of years, hopefully with help from the community in terms of how we're going to do that. Taking those one at a time, I think, in a backwards way, the Earthscope science program, what's going to be the future of that? It's too early to really say. At the beginning of Earthscope, we debated on whether to have a separate program or not. And I think it was decided to have one, both for scientific reasons, and that is, the whole vision of Earthscope is to integrate the seismological, the geodetic, and the fault nature of Earthscope, and use that integrated science as the power of Earthscope as a whole. I think that's working, maybe not as well as it could, because it's still young, I think, that idea. But we could have equally just taken those funds and put them among the programs that deal with those things: geophysics, tectonics, geochemistry, geology, various programs that can also take those same proposals. In fact, they do now jointly review many of the proposals that come in for Earthscope in the other programs, because there's definitely not enough money in the Earthscope program to fund everything that we'd like to fund, in my opinion anyway. So what we do with the Earthscope science program is not clear at this point, and we probably won't make a decision on that until fairly late in the game. The whole idea of the next big thing, if we're thinking about an MRESC scale thing, MRESC has got these strictures on it, that it has to be a facility that you're building and constructing, but it also has to be a certain size. In other words, if you had something that was like 30, 50, $70 million, it couldn't go to the MRESC account because it's too small, which is kind of weird. MRESC and GEO has to be like $100 million or larger. If you wanted to fund something that was up to $4 million, $5 million, I forgot, there's a special account at NSF called MRI, and I believe it's $4 million is the limit to that now. But there's this whole range in between $4 million and $100 million that we still don't know how we're going to fund those things. They're intermediate projects, and we have funded things like that, but it's been through undefined processes, it's my opinion. So that's a difficult thing to do, and if we wanted to propose an MRESC project, it's definitely too late to do that for, say, the end of the current SAGE award, because right now MRSC has become so unwieldy and with so many rules that it's at least a 5-year or so process from start to finish, unless you get very strong political push somehow. So the next big thing is probably not what we're talking about in terms of the follow-on to the end of the SAGE award, which is in four years or more. So the facility issue sets up a real timetable for us, because we at NSF, in order to integrate the activities of EarthScope and the core facilities for IRIS and UNAVCO especially, we are under a lot of pressure from the National Science Board to recompete these things. And yet we didn't feel like none of us were ready to recompete EarthScope separately and the core facilities separately. It would be much better to compete the integrated aspects of those, and so we set up this integration of core and EarthScope that ended up in the SAGE and GAGE solicitation and proposals. And those are going to be coming due in 2018. In September 2018, we have to have a new follow-on to those in whatever we want to do. So because we promised, and to do that, to get permission to actually integrate those, we made a deal with the National Science Board is that we wouldn't recompete for this last go-round, SAGE and GAGE, that we would postpone the competition for another 5 years to allow SAGE and GAGE integration to happen in a reasonable way, and then compete. And so we're kind of on the books at the National Science Board that we're going to recompete for the 2018. So this sets up a timetable that is fairly strict. So if we want to have a new award on October 1 of 2018, I'm just going backwards, and these are approximate numbers, and Greg has got more precise ones, or we've been talking about more precise ones, but this is approximately right. That means in September of 2017, we have to start the approval process of any award through NSF. So going backwards in time, that means early 2017, there has to be a proposal deadline that we do a review. And if we go back one step before that, that means that we have to have a solicitation cleared and out the door in the spring of 2016. And that solicitation has to be fairly strict in terms of, or fairly complete in terms of what the scope is that we're asking for. And so that means in the fall of 2015, we basically have to have the definition of the scope done. So what that really means is that between now, 2014, and the spring of 2015, we have to be talking with you, the community, and getting your input, trying to decide what we're going to do in terms of the scope of this thing, the follow-on to the facilities. And Things that affect that, of course, are right now we don't have a division. There will be a new division director, hopefully coming this fall, and that person is going to have a fairly major role in this. Just as Herman Zimmerman was the new division director when we briefed him and led to Earthscope, we're going to be in exactly the same situation with a current AD and a new division director, and we need the support of both to carry out what we plan to do. So one suggestion, or certainly one obvious activity that I think we should do is once the community is fairly well defined in terms of what it wants to do, we need to set up a briefing, I think, for the new division director and the AD. And I've made this suggestion before. So that's, I think, a good thing to plan on, because the timetable is pretty short for us. So what are some key issues that have to be looked at by the community to help us in terms of defining the scope? Well, certainly the first thing is, what is the science that the community wants to do? Second, what parts of the current Earthscope and core facilities are needed to do this science? For example, we've constructed this MRESC facility. Are we through with it? Is it done? Is it still useful to do forefront science? If it was a telescope, would we just shut it down at the end of 10 years? I don't think so. But it has to be supported by what science we want to do and what science needs that facility in order to accomplish that. And then we need to have some help in terms of determining what programmatic support, that is science support, do we need and is reasonable to do this science. Of course, at NSF, we've always got this double-edged sword. What do we need? What's reasonable to do? When Earthscope was born, we were in this wonderful, looking back, it was a wonderful era of budgets increasing 5 to 6 to 7% a year. As soon as we started Earthscope, that immediately came to a screeching halt. For example, last year, all programs in EAR took a 10% cut. So what's going to happen in the future? It's impossible to predict. It depends a lot on politics and the state of the economy and things like that are really not in our control. But we need to have some idea about what is desirable and what is reasonable in terms of programmatic support. Another thing that would help, that certainly helps us all, is that we have to document and publicize these stunning results that are coming out from IRIS and the Earthscope vision. We must point to where these results lead to the next major advances. Where are we going to go now? What are the potentials? And what is next has to be, well, it'd be nice to be creative and not just incremental. In other words, it's, what new concepts, what new ideas are coming out that we now point the way towards new directions that we want to go. And certainly there is a large role to be played by IRIS. This is a very active and great community. UNAVCO is another good community. And then the Earthscope Science Steering Committee, which is currently chaired by Ramon Aerosmith. I think these are natural leading organizations that can help us do that. So thank you very much. I think this has been an exciting time. I'm very pleased with the way things have been going, and now I think we have to, as always, we're thinking of the next proposal. So I hope nobody's very nervous about it, but I think it's going to work out fine with the support of the community and hopefully the NSF management. Thank you very much. And I certainly welcome questions if there are any. Both for me and for any of the other program officers that are here, too.
So what mechanisms do you envision for getting this community input to this planning process, or what mechanisms and opportunities are there?
Well, I think one important mechanism would be, say, workshops organized by the community. So there's certainly, I think I am open to, any support, and the other programs are open to supporting workshops to answer these questions. And then I think the next important thing is to organize either one or multiple visits to brief NSF management in that, because you can't really come to NSF too often to show what wonderful science you're doing and asking for support for the good science that you're doing.
We are recording the session, so.
I must confess I'm a little surprised at this huge gap between the MRI and MREFC, which we've all been aware of for many, many years. Still seems like there's no plan to address. You think this is just because of the overall budget pressures, or are there other reasons within NSF that this hasn't been addressed, at least as far as I know? It must affect every field of science, certainly.
This is a great question. This is a huge issue, and it's been around for years. We proposed 10, 15 years ago, or longer probably, a mid-range, mid-scale facility thing, and within GEO, and we got approval for that. But that was basically to support a project that got booted out of the MRESC project, and so they called that mid-sized infrastructure. And we couldn't fund that unless we got approval to fund something that was in between. And so we got that approval. That kind of disappeared. Now I believe the National Science Board has looked at mid-sized infrastructure. And mid-sized infrastructure and project support is something that is being looked at right now. I think Greg's on a committee right now to look at that very same thing. And it's not that we don't fund mid-sized infrastructure and projects, it's that the process is not well defined, and which is a separate interesting story. But you're right, it's a well-recognized problem, and it's one that's been intractable up to the present, and for reasons that are, what are the reasons? Well, number one, it's a lot of money, and so you say, well, why, how did you fund the MRESC account? Well, that was a special thing that was started by the physicists and the astronomers, because they had these huge projects, and so they had the political clout to start an account that was separate from all the directorates and everything else. It's its own account at NSF. And so because of their clout, they were able to start that account to build these huge things. But when you start talking about medium-sized things like 50 million, 20 million, 50, 70 million, the answer that comes back is, well, you can do that within a directorate, because the directorates are, like 100 million, up to $1 billion. Actually, GEO is over $1 billion now that we've incorporated Polar. MPS is over $1 billion. So, what is $50 million? You can afford that. That's what comes back. And we haven't been able to step over that hurdle, because an individual program like the geophysics program could not fund a $20 million project. So that's not an answer to your question, but that lays out the problem that we have.
Thank you.
Here's a question over here.
So the next big thing science-wise
probably takes us to the edge of a continent, if not into the ocean. Is it feasible to think about sending in a proposal to deploy these ocean bottom stations, because they are much more expensive than putting out the instrument on land?
It was a really good question, and actually your leader is one of the people who've been involved in the early thinking about this. I think Bob Dietrich and I have talked about this would be a great thing to do. This would, of course, involve another division within GEO, the Division of Ocean Sciences, and they have a lot on their plate right now with ocean observatories, and right now they're continuing the drilling program, and they're having problems with funds to support science. So I think it's a great idea. So if your question is, should this go to as an MREFC thing, I think that's probably the only way that you're going to be able to fund that is with an MREFC effort. But that's a double-edged sword, because MREFC pays for the facility construction, but operations have to come out of the research accounts. And right now, it's hard to imagine something that large coming out of the research accounts of both OCE and EAR if they were to combine them. But of course, if we're talking about 5 years in the future, and you said, well, well, I don't know what the plans are for OOI and how long that's going to be in the drilling program. It depends a lot on those two things, I think. If those were to cease, you might have a little bit of operating room. Yeah, sure.
But in principle, if I remember correctly, when we started the US array, it wasn't really clear at the beginning how the science will be funded either. So maybe we have to do the facilities first to get more science money?
That is certainly the way we were thinking at the time. And of course, when US Array started, we were in this wonderful 5% to 7% a year increase, and so that was no problem. But we also were able to see what would happen with the drilling program and ocean observatories if the funding were to be flat, and we could see way back then that was a problem. So now we're not allowed the luxury of saying, well, the money's going to come from somewhere in the future. We actually have to carve it out of, this is my opinion anyway, if we're to start an MREFC project, we would have to be able to plan on 10 to 15 to 20% of that per year in terms of operating funds and say where that money is going to come from, and not be able to count on future budget increases. That's the world that we're in now, that we don't have this budget increase sort of scenario. We have to basically count on flat budgets.
Sort of a perennial question also is, if we're thinking of a new facility, how much does it matter whether it's in the U.S. or partly in the U.S. or wherever in the world is the best place to study it?
MPS is very successful in building very expensive telescopes in South America, for example. So, but that doesn't mean it's not important that it be in the U.S. It's a stronger case if it was in the U.S. You have to make a pretty strong case to do it outside the U.S. It has to be a unique place, or in Antarctica, or actually one of the MRSC projects had problems because their first installation was going to be in Canada and not in Alaska, and that caused some of the political problems that the Polar Cap Observatory had initially.
For example, China's full of active faults, and they have their own seismic. I mean, politically, that's not an issue at the moment?
No, that would be, as I say, the bar is higher if you go outside the U.S., and probably even higher if you're talking about China, for example. In the current, politics are involved also, as you can imagine.
So in a time of sort of constrained budgets, to what extent is NSF looking to partner with other agencies when some of the facilities actually really cross-cut the science questions that different agencies or even the missions that different agencies have?
Well, certainly NSF welcomes partnering with other agencies whenever possible, and especially when it makes sense scientifically, and that certainly does make sense in the case of IRIS and EarthScope. We have a number of agency partners, and hopefully they bring resources to strengthen that partnership. Thank you very much.